Then afterwards, the Kalopat was established that way. So Cholim Kivitz Shums, Chof Hey asks the question. He's got his first Cholim Kivitz Shum is on Pesachim actually. And the Rebbeisa, he asks a very strong question. He says, actually, you could say that when Hashem told it to Moshe Rabbeinu, it was before he had written it. And he had already then told him the Kalopat. If later they then put it in a different order, according to the order Hashem wanted, it wouldn't have worked. It's a complicated answer, but Hashem after anyway. Okay. Are we on, Moshe? So what's the time? I can't. It's 8 o'clock now. My phone. It's at 8 o'clock. Right. Oh, good luck, everyone. Oh. We're up to Daf Vav Amud Beis, a new topic. About 15, 20 lines from the bottom by the 2 dots. Omar Rav Yehuda Marav. Haboidek, one who does B'dikas Chometz, Sorich She'evater, he has to say bittul afterwards. Rashi says, Sorich She'evater. Says Rashi is slightly high on mine. Haboidek Sorich She'evater beliboy, in his heart. Samuch lebdike miyad v'oimer kol chamir dik v'beis ordein levotel, anything which is in my house should come bottom. Now, Rashi over here seems to contradict himself, because it's machlokes rishonim, can bitter work in your heart? Do you actually have to say the words kol chamir, or is it enough just to think it? And what does Rashi say? If you look at Rashi, Rashi starts off, in his heart, smash it with the heart's good enough, and then he finishes off, and you have to say, the Meister Mishnah says that it's not good enough in your heart. You have to actually use the words kol chamir. You should say the words. So a person who does B'dika has to say the words to do bittul. My tama. Why? So the Ran says a very interesting thing. The Ran in the back of the book is a very interesting. What do you mean my tama? Why? Or would you say the obvious reason? Why would you have to do bittul? Or would you say the most obvious reason for it is? Right. Or to say it more simply, that maybe you didn't do a good B'dika. I mean, like this. I did B'dikas Chometz. You know, many times you look for your car keys, you can't find them. Doesn't mean that they're not in the house somewhere. They could be still in the house. So when the reason you have to do bittul is simply because maybe you didn't look hard enough. So what's more says my time, or why should you? I'll tell you why not. Because maybe you didn't do a good job B'dika. That's right, do bittul just in case you didn't do B'dika. Says the Ran. No, that would not be a good reason. Why? Because Hashem only expects us to try our best. And if we did a B'dika, we're not to start being chishash that maybe there was still chometz left in the house. Because if that's the case, every time you do a mitzvah, maybe you start wondering, maybe I could have done a better job. Very interesting Ran. Do you hear what the Ran's saying? Because I said every time you finish B'dikas Chometz, you always have like a tiny fear in your heart, depends how OCD you are. Maybe there's some chometz left in the house. Says the Ran, that wouldn't be a reason to even be chishash, because you can't be. The Torah wasn't given to Malachim. So the fact is that's not a reason. Maybe you didn't do enough of B'dikas Chometz. That's not the reason. So why? What is the reason? So what it says, crumbs, it's impossible to look for. There'll be crumbs everywhere. Why do you have to do bittul? This is how the Rishonim explain. You don't need to bother doing bittul. They're automatically already mevuta. That means it is true that crumbs is a problem. Crumbs is a problem. But who cares it's a problem? Because at the end of the day, since the whole idea of bittul is hefka, they're automatically hefka. Again, I just want to mention the Rav brings a machlokes of you on these words. There's a question like this: when we say that crumbs are a problem, but it doesn't matter because you make them hefka, are we discussing crumbs less than a kazais, which would then come out that you're mechuyev to do your best to make sure that there's less than a kazais of chometz in your house? Or are we talking about crumbs which are more than a kazais? Normally, the expression would be crumbs is less than a kazais. If it's less than a kazais, so anyway, there's no problem because it's less than the shiur. Says but that maybe because of the problem with chatzis shiur also minater, but that would be a big problem. Let's example, you've got a toaster, and inside the toaster there's crumbs. Are you mechuyev to do anything about it? No. The Gemara says, oh. Okay, so he says it could be what? Oh, that's the shaila. Are we talking about crumbs which are more than the kazais because we join them together?
No, crumbs themselves is fine. If the bigger pieces, yeah, smaller pieces, then that's from of syrup, no?
I'm not catching you. It says again, if you got a toaster less than kazais,
with crumbs that are bigger,
right?
More than kazais.
But normally the word pure means less than the kazais. That's the one was a bit bothered about. Okay. So the world says it's because of crumbs. You don't need to be better than automatically bottom. And if you will say, since you lock your front door, everybody locks the front door at night. So when you lock the front door, what are you thinking? I'll look after my wallet, my phone, and everything in my house. And what's everything in my house? It includes the crumbs. So therefore, you're showing that your crumbs are not hefker, but that your crumbs are of value to you. It says, well, that's not true. V'atanya. The halacha is that anything which is hefker, you're not chayev to take trumas hamaisis from, and there's no problem of stealing, right? If a person's got a field of hefker, there's no problem of stealing. You don't take trumas hamaisis. Now, what happens if a person's got a number of plants in his garden, in his field? Some of them which is not interested in at all, and some of them which is very interested. Why would you not be interested in them? So Rashi explains that there's certain kinds of grapes and figs that they never get ripe, and they always remain sour, etc. So you're locking your garden, your field, because of the other lesson, because you've got good pomegranates or something. But you don't care about the grapes. But the fact that you're locking the field, does that prove that the grapes are now not hefka and they're chayav in trumas hamaisos? That's the shayla over here. What time you will learn? Sofer te'enim. First, has got these figs which are growing at the very end, meaning they'll never ripe. And you guard the field because you've got good grapes. Or alternatively, another story. Sofer anovim. You've got grapes at the end. And you're keeping your field guarded because of pumpkins and cucumbers. That means you're keeping your field guarded because of cucumbers, etc. But really, at the same time, in that field, there's also a bit of grapes. What's the din? If you want those bad grapes or bad figs, you're not allowed to take them because they're stealing. If the balabais doesn't care about these grapes, there's no problem of stealing. So we see over here that if I lock up my field for grapes, and at the same time there's pumpkins there, in the end, I lock it up because of pumpkins, at the same time there's grapes, and I don't want the grapes, then you're allowed to help yourself, and there's no din trumas hamaisos. The question is, you've locked up the field. The answer is that I locked it up for a different reason completely, nothing to do with the grapes that are in the field. So we see over here that when you lock your front door, and you want to guard your wallet, your phone, and everything else, it doesn't mean that you want to look after your crumbs. In fact, you're not looking after your crumbs. And since you're not looking after your crumbs, therefore the halacha is that it's hefka. And then the question comes back, so why in the world do I need to do bedika? Why can't I rely? Why do I need to do bittul? Sorry, why do I need to do bittul? Why can't I rely on bedikas chametz? Why should I bother with bittul? What will happen is you'll find a nice cake, and you'll think to yourself that this is very nice, and you won't want to burn it, because the mitzvah is to burn it, and you'll keep it, and you will not burn it. Maybe it's why do we insist that you do bittul straight away? Do bittul if you ever find it. And this explains because a person doesn't want to burn a nice piece of cake, but bittul on a nice piece of cake he will do immediately. So that's not a problem. The bittul is like this: if you come on Pesach, you find a nice piece of cake. So burning straight away, that you'll be reluctant to do. But bittul, you don't care to do straight away.
No, then if you move back to it, it's not yours. So you don't care to burn it.
No, I think the vote is like this, because to burn it when you see something nice, you know that it's chametz. You're not going to eat it. Not going to show it.
But then you've done bittul.
Again,
No, but more so
bittul. Oh, that's what asks in a minute. That's what asks in a minute about the bailus. Again, let's say this is okay. We'll see. Let's go to the world inside then. The mishkach selevat. What says that do bittul straight away when you find it. The mishkach selebosa is sur v'lavishusay kaimer. The halacha is that something which is asa bahano, something which you're not allowed to get any pleasure from, is not yours. It isn't yours. So chametz, once it becomes asa, is not yours. If it's not yours, so therefore you can't do bittul. You can only do bittul. Bittul is a kind of hefka. You can only do a hefka on something which belongs to you. You have to burn it because that is, first of all, there's a din of tashpisu, and second of all, to eat it. Okay. The Ma'aser says like this: after Issa, you can't do it. It says, there are two things that do not belong to a person. The Torah makes it as if it is yours. What are those two things? It means like this. If I go go on to bury new road, I dig a hole in the ground, and then somebody trips or a car crashes or somebody drops his cups because he's carrying them. What's the halacha? I have to pay. Why do I have to pay? Because it's my mazik, it's my damages, it's my thing damage. That pit does belong to me. Can I claim ownership? Of course not. The Torah considers it to be mine, even though it's not actually mine. It's only mine that I am obligated to pay for the damages. The same thing, Chametz on Pesach is not mine, because it is asa bahano, something which is asa bahano. You can't get any pleasure from it. So it has no value, no financial value, no monetary value. So it's not yours. So therefore, if that's the case, let me have chametz on Pesach. What's the problem? Let me buy chametz on Pesach. Who cares? No, the Torah makes it yours. So the Gemara says like this: why do we have to do bittul in case a person finds a piece of cake on Pesach and he can't do bittul then because it's not his anymore to Pesach?
Worry about the media stuff. Either of you is not mine.
I didn't catch. Sorry.
Not more worrying.
Yeah.
Either is not mine, but also will stop eating. That's not that the problem.
So what were you see? Asking the kasha why we're chayshish? You're asking what? Right.
It's not your chometz.
Right, it's not my chometz, right?
You can't have it in my house either because
Right.
For
Right.
to happen that they will start eating. Either
Right.
it's not mine. But,
Right. You're chayshish back up to eat it.
Yeah.
I hear. So therefore, that's why we don't want you to have the chometz. That's why we tell you to do b'tikas chometz. Yes. I hear. Says the Gemara. For the vakle about vakle b'chavish. So what says let's do bits on the 4th hour, the 5th hour. Why the 4th hour, the 5th hour? Meaning, why do we tell you to do bits on chametz at the night of b'tikas chametz? You've got another whole 5 hours until you have to get rid of it. You've got more than 5 hours. You do b'tikas chametz night of the 14th. You've got the whole morning and then do bits of that. It says well, who since that's not the time when it becomes awesome. You may never come to do it. That means we want you to do bittul at a time when you're more likely to remember. If we were to say to do bittul the last minute, which is the end of the 4th hour, it won't work. We show you that's the kasha to posha. Posha always means like an avera. Now over here we're being chish. Posha is so Rashi explains posha yishkach v'yovilidei pshir. You'll forget to do bittul at the right time, and then you'll come to do an avera when the chametz actually is come back. So Rashi is also like this, because of the problem that we want you to do bittul, and we want you to remember to do bittul. So we have to choose a time when you're likely to remember. When will you remember? With the time of b'tikas chametz. It says well, top of the page. When the vatle b'shis, so do bittul when it's ready the 6th hour. It says, well, so do abonon in Avei, by the 6th hour, it's awesome to abonon keduvai, it's as if it's awesome in our Torah, but lav yishusei kaima, it's not yours. But lo motzi mevatel sikam mevatel. That means even something which only awesome to abonon, because min Torah, it's only awesome from when? At the end of the 6th hour. Mid abonon, this is also from the beginning of the 6th hour. So therefore, we can't tell you to do bit in the beginning of the 6th hour, because you're not allowed to, it's not yours anymore. Somebody does kedushin to a woman, he goes up to a woman, and he says, here, I've got a maisa kedushin. I feel bechite kurdunaisa. Even with wheat that grows in kurdunaisa. Rashi kurdunaisa is the mountain of Arad, somewhere in Turkey, where the wheat was of very poor quality. And it would take a very long time for it to rise. Ein choshen a kedushin, we're not choshesh for kedushin. Why? Why are we not choshesh for kedushin? Because not his. And therefore, is not given her present. If I, for example, take something which is worth nothing, and I go up to a woman and I say, "Had b'kodeshes li with this," then halacha is not b'kodeshes because it's not worth anything. So the Gemara over here is saying that even though this is only chametz midrabanan, the kedushin is not chal. Here we have a very famous Rashi. The Rashi asks the kasha that min haTorah it is worth something because min haTorah when does chametz become also bano? Only after 6 hours. And I'd be mekadesh a woman, which is a kedusha d'oraisa, with something which min haTorah is worth something. So the question is, let it be kedusha min haTorah. Midrabanan will be kedusha, min haTorah will be kedusha. Says Rashi that when a person does a ma'aser kedusha, he says, "Had kedusha skibet avazu kadas Moshe v'Yisrael." Only if Moshe and Kaisel want it. Do Moshe and Kaisel want this ma'aser kedusha? No, because they hold that this is not worth anything. So therefore, the kedusha is not chal. Ma'aser, the other Rishonim that argue with Rashi, and they say that you don't need to come on to this because the problem is that it isn't worth anything. We don't care why it's worth nothing. The Ran himself writes, if you take a coin, which the king has established, that this coin is no longer in currency and it's not worth anything, and you go up to a woman and you kaddish her with that, will it work? No, because the mice, you've given her something which is worth nothing. Who decided it's worth nothing? The local king. Similarly, if you make kaddish with chometz, it's nothing to do with Rabbanan or Deraisa. Rashi's kasha is, if you look at Rashi's kasha is, it's only Rabbanon, how could it be? You gave him mati and Eishis Ish to the world. How can you do such a thing? So Rashi says, that's where she saw. Says the Ran, no. The Chachamim told you that this is worth nothing. At the end of the day, what are you going to do with this piece of bread? You go up to a woman after the 6th hour and you say to her, here's a piece of bread, I want to kaddish you with that piece of bread. What can she? She can't eat it, she can't enjoy it, she can't sell it, she can't do anything with it. So tachlis good, it's worth nothing. So therefore, it's nothing to do with the Rabbanon and Deraisas. And Rashi, this Ran says, Rashi over here is misplacing the cheshbon of Kedas Lo Yisrael. Says the Gemara like this: once it's also, can you not do bittul? V'hotanya, we have a brayso. A person sitting in the shiur, the niska sheish chometz v'seich beis, so suddenly remembers, oh, I've got chometz in my house. Mevakle beliboy, he does bittul in his heart. Echod Shabbos ve'echod Yom Tov, whether it's Shabbos or whether it's Yom Tov. Now, which day of the week are we talking about? It's Shabbos or Yom Tov? Now, Bishvim is Shabbos, Bashkachas Lo, it's very possible, Shabbos. We just said you can't do bittul once it's also Behano. You can't do bittul once it's also Behano. So therefore, Erev Pesach can be a Shabbos, like this year. So you're sitting Shabbos morning in shul, listening to a shiur, and you suddenly remember you got chometz in the house, and you know by the time the shiur is finished, you're going to get home, will be after Zman Issa, and then you can't do bittul, so you do bittul then. Yom Tov Yom Tov, which Yom Tov is going to be? It must be the Yom Tov Pesach. I remember there was very little on Jewish Day actually. What happens if Chanukah falls on Purim? Which Aladissim do you say? That's a silly question, because so which Yom Tov is it going to be? We all sat there like thinking about it. Okay, which Yom Tov is going to be? It can't be Pesach or Shavuos. The only Yom Tov is Pesach. It can't be Shavuos or Sukkot. It can only be Pesach. So it's already Yom Tov of Pesach. So you're sitting in shul listening to a shul Yom Tov of Pesach. I said, you remember you got a chometz. What are you going to do? Do bittul. How can you do bittul? It's not yours anymore. The halacha is you can't do bittul once it's Pesach already. So the Gemara says, we're talking about a Talmud who sits in front of his Rebbe. He realizes he made a dough. And he's scared that it's going to be chometz. It isn't chometz already. What happened was before the shiur out to make a dough on Yom Tov. So he made a dough on Yom Tov. And then what happened was he went to the shiur and he was hoping that the shiur would be very short, to come home and make matzahs. But the fellow is dashing on and on and on, and he doesn't want to walk out because it's rude. So what should he do? If he doesn't come home, the dough is going to become chometz. It's going to be proper dough. So what should he do? He does bittul.
Isn't the rice worse than the
of the rock? The answer is no, because at the moment it's not doing an issa. Why? Because at the moment it's not yet chometz. It's going to become chometz. By the time it comes chometz, then these are bittul. It's interesting. I saw that.
This whole thing, it's in your property.
Right.
It's not yours in the battle. Isn't it? It's value.
No, but Maisa he did bittul before. Exactly. Right.
The fact that it's in your property.
Yeah, there is a value. If you haven't done bittul, then there is a problem value or value. No. If you've done bittul, there's no problem value or value. That's a different reason, because in case you might come to eat it, you have to make a mechitza to nikel. So reminder not to eat it. That's a different thing. It's not derisive because of not so. That's all. So the Gemara says, this guy says, "Isim gulgetz." It's called battle. We come to techmetz. So do bittul before it becomes chometz. Says well, dekanami. It's meduyek. That means we can prove that pshat. Diktonya yesh v'sich v'samedrash. You're sitting in the shul shmamino. Here you have to hold cup of it. You have to hold cheshbon. This way Rashi goes to the whole cheshbon over here. The Gemara over here says, I'm going to prove to you that we're not talking about chometz, but we're talking about something that's going to become chometz. Let's get it clear, the Brisa. The Brisa says you're sitting listening to a shiur, and you have chometz, you're mevatel it. The simple explanation of the Brisa is that you've got genuine chometz, you've got a loaf of bread, you've got a packet of biscuits, and you do bittul. And the Gemara asks the kasha, how can that be? You can't do bittul, it's already Yom Tov, it's also ba'ano. Answers the Gemara, we're not talking about something which is already chometz, we're talking about something that's going to become chometz. That's what we're talking about. Says the Gemara, I'm going to prove that we're talking about something which is going to become chametz and isn't chametz already, not like the simple meaning of the brisa. What's the proof? Because the brisa says he's sitting based on medrash. Explains Rashi that the brisa is talking about somebody who's uncomfortable to walk out of the shiur, and therefore he's forced. The only way to get rid of the chametz is he can't go out to the shiur, he's embarrassed. So what's he going to do? Do bitter. Mashma that if there was an option to come out of the shiur, let's say he wasn't stuck in the base of medrash, let's say he was at home, he wouldn't do bitter. What would he do? He would do something even better. What would he do even better? Burn it. Destroy it. The problem is, how could he? If it's real chametz, it's a muktzah, or it's also to burn it. So therefore, he anyway has nothing better to do. No, because it's muktzah. It's muktzah. Elamai, the fact that the brisa says he's stuck in the base of medrash, and that's why he's doing bitter. If not for the fact he's stuck in the base of medrash, there would be something better to do. Must be that it's not yet chametz. It's a dough which is not yet chametz. And what better thing does he have? What better thing does he have? To go and bake it, and by bake it, it will never become chametz. Make it into matzah. So therefore, that's the proof that we're talking about something that's potentially going to become chametz. If we're talking about something which is already chametz, why did the brisa have to talk about a case of somebody stuck in the base of medrash and can't get out? And that's why he does bitter. Mashma, if he could get out, he's got something better. If it's already chametz, there's absolutely nothing he can do. Elamai, we're talking about somebody that can do something. But what could he possibly do? There's nothing else you can do. There's nothing you can do. No, because it's muktzah. If it's real muktzah, we discussed that before.
No, but does the derisa not push it away?
No,
only if it's chametz.
No, we can't.
What makes muktzah?
No, it's not
Because
if it's not chametz.
So Elamai, we're talking about it's not yet muktzah. It's not yet chametz. That's right. Again,
Why
the
muktzah?
I'll just say no, the derisa doesn't push away. No, it doesn't. No.
It's not muktzah.
Well, no, it's about Yom Tov. It's about the Yom Tov. I just want to add one Kiddush. Maybe it's what's bothering you, but I just want to get the first point clear, because the first point is not clear. The second point will certainly not be clear. The Pashup Shattered Prices we're talking about real chametz, and the Gemara changes it that it's not real chametz, but that something is going to become chametz. Says, well, what's my proof? The proof is because he's doing bitter. Mashma that he's got something better to do. If it's real chametz, there's nothing better to do. Elmai, it's something that's going to become chametz, and something which is going to become chametz. So therefore, he's got something better to do, to go home and bake it. Says the Mashal, which maybe what's bothering you is, this says like this, that if we're discussing somebody that's already Yom Tov, so therefore, if it's already Yom Tov, he can't do bitter. If he can't do bitter, so therefore he's stuck to the case of what? Of the fact that since he can't do bitter, because at the end of the day, it's already Yom Tov, he can't do bitter. So he's going to be over Bal. So of course we're going to allow him to push away the Issa D'Rabbanan of Muktzah to get rid of it. It says the Mashal that can't be true, because the Brisa finishes off. What should he do? He should do bitter. So it's sad that you're saying that bitter does work b'Issa Hano, which is what the Gemara tried to prove from this Brisa. So he's got the option to do bitter. If he's got the option to do bitter, then you're not allowed to do anything to Rabbanon to get rid of it. So Elamai, the Brisa can't talk about Vilchametz, meaning it's a catch-22 a little bit, meaning that the Brisa does say do bitter. So the Gemara wants to prove that what? That something which is Asa Bahano, something which is forbidden, you can still do bitter. Well, if we do have something which you can do, if you can do bitter on this no, then you won't be allowed to do anything else, because you would not be allowed to even touch muktzah if you've got the option to do bitter. Elamai would talk about something which is not yet chametz, and therefore the option that you have to do is to go and bake it. That's pshat in the price. Okay.
Just to clarify, it becomes muktzah only on Yom Tov itself, not.
If it's
So let's say this occasion don't use Shabbat.
Right.
Generally, it says Malachim and it says one trip.
That's right.
If you find comments after, it's still not muktzah, even as this is not.
That's right. Whereas if you find Erev Pesach after 6 hours, it's not muktzah.
No,
But it's only muktzah on Yom Tov.
You want to say, you make the dough
Yeah.
and go to the shiur under 18 minutes.
He was hoping for these 8-minute dafs so he can get. So you can get any time. Omar Bavuna. A new topic. Omar Bavuna, Omar Rav. If you've got moldy bread and you can't tell whether it was a piece of matzah that went moldy or a piece of bread that went moldy. So you can't tell. You must remember, nowadays we're very machmir, we have very thin matzahs, etc. But in the old days we'd have up to a tefach thick. So they could have like something which looked a little bit like a pita or something. The Sfardim, you still have it. So they don't know if it's chametz or matzah. So what should you do? Kiven shirov so matzah muteres. If the majority what you use in that box is matzah, it's mutter. Hey chidami. So well, what's the case? If you could tell it's chametz, kiyov so matzah may have. Of course you can't tell it's chametz because then it doesn't help you that majority is matzah. This is chametz. You can't tell if it's chametz or matzah, but since the majority of the times you use this box is for matzah, it's okay. Can you imagine such a thing with our nerve and we never do such a thing? You open the box, you see, let's say you've got a bread box, which you cleaned out because you're allowed to wash it out of bread box, and you put matzah, now you can't tell if it's chametz or matzah. Oh, majority is matzah, anyway, the vice the Gemara says you're allowed to. Fade the Gemara. My ear grows to matzah, fit grows to matzah. Nasal bossa bassa. Let's go according to the latter. We're going to have now a discussion like this, an interesting discussion, a logical discussion. You can think about it yourself. Imagine you've got a box which you use for different items, and you're not sure about a certain item, let's say if it's chametz or matzah. One way to look at it is to go after the majority. What do you normally use the box for? Do you use it for chametz? Do you use it for matzah? But there's another logical way to look at it, is what was the last thing you put inside it? Because it makes more sense to go according to the last thing rather than to go with the most things. That is the question over here. Do you go after majority or do you go after the last thing? Now the Gemara is going to bring a Mishnah which discusses the money in Yerushalayim. Money in Yerushalayim, if you find money, you're allowed to keep it. And the question is it got Kedusha or Ma'aser Sheni? Ma'aser Sheni was the most years you would have, and the first, second, fourth, and fifth, you would have to take, after you took Truma and Ma'aser, you'd have to take another 10% of all your produce and take it to Yerushalayim. If it was too difficult to schlep all that produce to Yerushalayim, what would you do? You'd redeem it on money and go to Yerushalayim, and with the money you'd buy food. Now, the majority of the money of Ma'aser Sheni, everybody had Ma'aser Sheni come out in those days, and the vast majority of the money was used to buy korbanos, to buy animals. The Gemara actually tells us that Chazal wanted people to buy shlomim. That was the ideal thing to do. So now the question is, if you find money in Yerushalayim, different places, we're going to discuss what's the halacha. We're going to see that we don't go after majority, we go after the last thing, which comes back as a question against Rava that says that you go after the majority of chametz and matzah. Why do we go after the last thing? First of all, explains this in detail. Now, if you find money in the animal market, you can always be sure it's ma'aser, because the vast majority of all money in Yerushalayim was always ma'aser sheni money. Bahar Abayis, on the base of Migdosh mountain, chulin, you can say it's chulin. The more explained, Yerushalayim, if you find money not in the animal market and not in the base of Migdosh, but everywhere else in Yerushalayim, b'shas ovegim when it's Yom Tov Ma'aser, because you've got a lot of people coming from around the country with all the Ma'aser money. B'shayim Ma'aser sholo chulin. V'omar Rav Shmai Ba'zeo Ma'itama, hol v'shuki Yerushalayim as soon as come b'chol yoy. What happens is they used to sweep the streets of Yerushalayim every single day. So, Rashi already points out that they did not sweep the Har Bayis every day. Anybody know why they didn't sweep the Har Bayis every day? Rashi says two reasons why they didn't sweep the Beis Hamikdash every day. You weren't allowed to walk. We learned in the Brachos, you're not allowed to walk on the Vakshabarak. You mustn't walk onto the Har Bayis with dust on your feet with muddy shoes. And the second thing is it's on a mountain. A mountain top gets windswept a very lot, so you didn't need to sweep it. Yerushalayim got swept every day. So let's go through the quick halachas quickly. The Beis Hamikdash mountain never got swept. Since it never got swept, we have to go according to the whole year. In the whole year, the vast majority of money on the Beis Hamikdash mountain was chulin. So therefore, you can take its chulin. This asks the question. We also learned in Brachos, you're not allowed to take your wallet onto the Har Bayis. So how could there ever be any money there? So this says you weren't allowed to go with your money belt because that looks like you're going on business. The money which is underneath your cloak was okay. Okay, that's good. That's a small thesis, the second thesis on the page. But Lemais again, going on the Har Bayis, since they never swept it, you go according to the whole year. The whole year is going to be chul. You go to the marketplace, the whole year it is ma'aser. Why is the whole year ma'aser? Because everybody would buy with their ma'aser sheni money. They would buy animals the whole year round. The vast majority in the animal marketplace with ma'aser sheni. The rest of Yerushalayim, not the Har Bayis, not the animal market. So then, since they used to sweep it every day, so on Yom Tov time when everybody's coming to buy the ma'aser sheni products, it's ma'aser sheni. The rest of the year is chulin. So you see that something which is swept every day, what do you go after the last thing? So why are we here in this box? We're not sure if it's chametz or matzah. Rashi points out that most people, they wash out the boxes every time they finish with a product. They wash it out before they put the next things inside. That's what Rob asks the question.
No, I'm saying here.
Why?
Because during the regular row of people,
Right.
there's a lot more people, so the bigger
Right.
percentage you could argue. Like,
No, because at the end of the day, so then why after Yom Tov, the day after Yom Tov, what are you going to do?
Far fewer people.
I'm not sure.
It's far fewer people.
Okay. I want to, okay, I hear. Okay, whatever was before went. These are new ones. So the early ones have gone. This is the last one. So why do you go after the vast? If you got a box and you don't know if it's chametz or matzah, why do you go after the majority? Go after the last one. We're talking about a moldy piece of bread. Since it's moldy, obviously it wasn't the last thing you put in the box. So we go after the majority. Anyway, you push matzah may have it. If the majority is matzah, who cares? If it's moldy, so when does it from? Long before Pesach. If it's long before Pesach, it must be chametz. We're talking about where it's many days of Pesach. It's like the 6th day of Pesach. So it's not like the 1st day of Pesach where if it's moldy, it must have come before Pesach and be chametz. It's still like the 4th or the 5th day of Pesach. We're already many days of Pesach. If that's the case, if it's been many days of Pesach, what's the havnish b'chametz? What's the chances that it's chametz? You've had 5-6 days of Pesach. The chances that your bread box is going to have bread inside, it's very unlikely. It's also very moldy. Since it's very moldy, therefore it's obviously must be chametz. Since it's been many days of matzah, and we say, we had bread, matzah, fresh, warm matzah was put inside this box. But when you put fresh bread, warm matzah, onto a piece of matzah, it makes the other matzah get very moldy. So therefore, we're talking about something which has been 5-6 days of Pesach, plus it's very moldy. The chiddush is that since it's been many days of Yemei matzah, you can rely that it's matzah, and you don't have to worry about chametz. Do we go after the last? I mean, the case we started off with a place where we said go after majority. The Gemara says you can't go after majority because we see from the money in Yerushalayim that you go after the last. And now the Gemara asks against itself. The Gemara says, what did I just tell you that you go after the last? It says, well, no, I've got another place where we see you don't go after the last. Let's say you've got a box and you sometimes put money of your own private money and sometimes you put maisa shady money. In Moiv chulin. In Moiv maisa. If most of the time it's for chulin, it's chulin. If most of the time it's for maisa, it's maisa. You just told me a minute ago that you go after the last thing. So it's a contradiction. In Yerushalayim, we go after the last thing which the money would be used. And here you go after the majority. The Gemara gives 3 answers. Let's get the question clearly. From the Mishnah in Yerushalayim, we see clearly you always go after the last thing. And in this box, we don't go after the last thing, we go after the majority. The question is, how does that make sense? The Gemara gives 3 answers. Says, used both at the same time. Sorry, you used both at different times. The in your days and the safe. I mean, like this, we don't know what the last one is. When you don't know what the last one is, then you go after what's used majority. When you know what the last one is, if you've got a big box, a drawer, and you throw your money in and also your mice money. So if you know what the last one is, you go after the last one. If you don't know what was the last one, so then you go after what's the majority money inside it. You use it at the same time. In the same box, you put one pile of mice money and one pile of chulin money. So you can't say go after the last. Why can't you say go after the last? Because there is no last. So then you go after the majority. It was found in a small hole inside the box. Since it was found in a small hole inside the box, you can't say go after the last. Why? Because since it was in a hole, it's obviously been there a long time. It's not something which is on the surface. On the surface, you see always the last one, you take it out. But actually, there's the box as well, the box of food. When you take a box of food, you always take out the last thing, you clear it out. But if you find something deep hidden inside the hole, so there's no reason anymore to say it's the last, because it could have been there for a long time ago, so you go after the majority. The Gemara from this Gemara says that whenever you've got a question, what was inside a box, or what was inside for money, or chametz, or matzah, you always go after the last, except in 3 occasions where you go after the majority, and those all 3 are basically situations where you have no reason to rely on the last. But generally speaking, we shouldn't even say from this Gemara comes out that if you've got a suffix and the question is what to go after, majority or the latter, you go after the latter. The latter is a more powerful raya than majority. Okay. Omar Yehuda, a whole new topic. Haboidek, somebody who checks, tzorich shivoich has to make a bracha. I saw the Bam Chalav says a very interesting thing. He says if you check your letters for flies, do you make a bracha? No. Why not? Why not?
It's not specific means to make a run on that.
Wait a second. By the time you get to B'dikas Chometz, it's less likely there's Chometz in the house than there's flies in your lettuce. What?
One mitzvah say of taking comments. Because to learn is no mitzvah say. You have to make sure the letters. No, you've got to
Okay.
say of making
You say. I tell you what he says. Okay. He says you don't make a bracha on the hechsher mitzvah. You only make a bracha on a mitzvah. And what's the right from this? Why did I mention it? That B'dikas Chometz is not in order to get rid of Chometz. And if there's no Chometz, you haven't done a mitzvah. It's an actual mitzvah itself. That's what they say. No. But it's a hechsher mitzvah. The checking is only a hechsher mitzvah. A shaking, this is a real mitzvah. There's a difference between a hechsher mitzvah and a real mitzvah. Oh, we're going to see. I'm just telling you about it. We're going to see. Oh, very good jumping. But Maisa, we don't make the fact that you make a bracha on the B'dikas Chometz teaches a very fundamental thing I mentioned once before. B'dikas Chometz is a mitzvah. If you don't find any Chometz, you've still done your mitzvah. It's actual mitzvah. It's not like flies. It's actual mitzvah. What? Oh, we'll see.
People hide 10 pieces of bread.
Oh, my mevorach. What bracha do you make? Okay. My mevorach. We'll see. In fact, they've only gone in. My mevorach. Poppy on my mishmei over the bay chometz. Okay. Poppy on mishmei over the bay chometz. Make a bracha. Actually, so it's Sivanu le bay chometz. Poppy on my mishmei over al pio chometz. So again, he asks the question that if I just told you that B'dikas Chometz itself is a mitzvah, so why did they make the bracha al bio chometz, which is what you're going to be doing tomorrow, burning it? Make a bracha al B'dikas Chometz. He asks it on himself. So he says no, because at the end of the day, the reason why they made the mitzvah is in order that you should get rid of chometz. It's not just to check for chometz. Okay, we're running out of time, and there's a lot to say. So the work is, but now look at this. Everybody knows that when you do a mitzvah, you always make the bracha before the mitzvah, not after the mitzvah. So therefore, you want to make a bracha which is future tense. So if you would say the word levai, everybody agrees it's future tense, and therefore levai chometz should be perfect. Zayin was based off of the page. The machlekes when you say al bio is that future tense or past tense. It's past tense. It's no good. It's future tense. And the Rishonim will ask the question that if levoy is future tense according to everybody, why stick your head into a problem? Just say levoy, and then you'll be okay. This is a very big question. In fact, the Ri writes about this question is I don't know the answer. The Ri, right? It was nephew of Binu Tams. It was quite a great person, great grandson of Rashi. He didn't answer. The Ran has a huge arichus about this question. We'll come to it in a minute, maybe. So, this is a problem. But the Gemara says that you go machlikas. Levai, every piece is future tense. Al bio is a machlikas. Meisvi. Al hamila. Now, when do you do this bracha? You do it before the milah, right? Levi. You make he's our moil. So if you do a bracha when we came to Shabbos and Chesmilah, we did this al hamila. That's future tense. So why you shouldn't say lomol? Because according to you, the al is past tense. That's no good. It's a rather it's future tense. So it says Hossam hechi nema. What are you going to say? Nema lomol. Should you say lomol? He has to do the milah. Rashi explains that we're talking about normally you have a moil for the shtot, for the town, and he's not the father of the son. So it's not his mitzvah. Whose mitzvah is it? It's the father of the son. So therefore, he can't say Hashem should say lomol. It's my mitzvah to do milah. It's not his mitzvah. So Hashem should say ala milah, that there's a concept of mitzvah. What happens if he's actually if the mu'ad is the father? And he should say lomol. And again, we do it before shchita. So the problem is, how can you say such thing? It's not a mitzvah to shecht. Why is it not a mitzvah to shecht? Who asked you to eat the meat? If you don't need to eat meat, you don't need to make a bracha. So therefore, it's not actual mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah to shecht. So what says does it need to shecht? And the most people change these words. What about calling Pesach and calling Kodshim? What are you going to say? So I just want to show very, very quickly, because this is something that should disturb me terribly. If you look at Rashi, Pesach v'Kodshim, says Rashi, Habalim nitztavu. If you bring a Korban Pesach, Mitzvah will bring a Korban Pesach this year, who's mechuyev to shecht it? Who's mechuyev to shecht it? The owners. Rashi says, who actually shecht the Korban Pesach? Did anybody know? Kohen did. Basically, Rashi says the owners are mechuyev to. Shliach. Very good. Shliach is a raya that when a shliach does a mitzvah for you, it's as if you did the mitzvah yourself. That means like this, right? Tefillin, I can't say to you, you put on tefillin for me. Here it's good enough. There's a famous shach in Hilchas Mila, which every time I have a baby boy, I get stressed about. What's the shach say in Hilchas Mila? That a person should do his own bismillah for his son. Because he says, imagine you've got a mitzvah yourself, and you're passing it on to the moyel of the son. Says the shach, you should do it yourself. And I've never done it. I've never done it. Says the shach, what's going on? So all the achronim, they shout at the shach, get very upset with him. And they say, look at this Rashi. Rashi says the mitzvah is what? That you should do the shechita yourself. And who does it? The Kohen does it. Is a raya that you're not mechuyev to it yourself. You could ask somebody else to do it. So you could always see the sigh of relief, and you can just call up Levi without any problems. Oh, the Ran over here asks the kasha. Do you know what the Ran says? He says, whenever we say lamed, lo niach tefillin misatif atzitzis, it's a mitzvah you have to do yourself. Whenever you say la, it's a mitzvah you have to do yourself. So indeed, you would say it. No, so the father, if he does bismillah to his own son, says no, because he's not mechuyev. He himself is not mechuyev. So you mix it. You're right. The word saying is that if a person shecht his own korban Pesach, if a person shecht his own korban Pesach, and for the Gemara Chedami, if you shecht your own korban Pesach, you say lishchut. Okay. Yes, there is that true, but the shachs say more than that. Okay. Meisvei. Now we don't pass like the following brisa. When you prepare the lulav, you make a shechionu when you tie up the lulav. That means erev sukkos, when you tie up the lulav, you have to make a shechionu. Not a lotzis boy when you pick it up to be yotza. Al netilas lulav. Al, you said according to one man dama. Al is past tense. It's no good. When you pick it up, you've already been yotza. Since you've already been yotza, this is very complicated. Oh, right. So I'm going to say once, I won't catch it because this is a cheshbon. The Gemara says the mitzvah of the tilas lulav is past tense, and tilas which is no good to be future tense. Answers the Gemara because once you pick it up, you've already been yotza. Says Tosis, you've already been yotza, so how can you make a bracha? It's too late. Says Tosis, because he's still got more of a mitzvah to shake it, so therefore he's still future tense. The Ran and others all ask the kasha, it's not true. What do? We hold it upside down, or we have kavanah not to be yotza. There's a variety of methods not to be yotza. Says the Ran like this, that most people nowadays, nowadays we're quite tamid chachamim, we do it all right. But nowadays people didn't have the energy to do it all. And you couldn't expect everybody to remember to turn it upside down, says the Ran. It was too difficult. So most people would just pick it up. Since most people just pick it up, so they're already yotza. So Chazan had to make the bracha for the vast majority of people that were not able to go through this whole games of turning it upside down. Says the Ran, if that's the case, tell everybody not to pick it up. Make the bracha before you pick it up, and then pick it up, and then do it future tense, because we always want to make a bracha future tense. Says that also they never wanted to do, because there's a long time distance between when it's on the table until you eventually go and pick it up. So therefore they had no choice but to make it past. It's quite interesting if you think about all the different stages, how they were forced eventually by lulav. Nowadays we do it at all. So since they made the takon of the bracha that way, even though nowadays indeed we do it in future, and it's only a matter of turning the rice around, we do, okay. Says the Gemara. So the Gemara says, because you've been yotzei, yochi, lotzis boy, yotza boy boyle. How can you say that he's trying to pick up the lulav and esek to be yotzei? He's already been yotzei. And ochanami, indeed, he's already been yotzei. We shouldn't miss the sefer, because the sefer wants to say leisha basukah. In the later part of the Bais, it's going to back future tense. Also, here we're to our future tense. So, tonalation nami lotzis boy. Diktani sefer. Oh, it's a sukkah. Somebody makes a sukkah for himself. When you build a sukkah, you should make a shechionu that you build the sukkah. Again, we don't pass like this. But Mishnah Bo himself writes that when you sit in the sukkah first night and you say shechionu, you should have kavanah for the Yom Tov plus that you built the sukkah. And therefore, let's say you didn't sit in the sukkah first night, and you only sat in the sukkah second night, so then you have to have kavanah then that you have kavanah for the sukkah which you built. What?
This is shechionu.
Yeah, it's not bracha, you're right.
Why are we comparing the two?
No, we're not. We're going to the next part. It's good. Words with nichdes leishav. So therefore, we see that it's future tense, and therefore That's why the Bryce in the beginning starts. The Hilchase al biur chometz, you have to say al biur chometz, not lebai chometz. And the Ran asks the kasha we asked before, why not say lebai? The answer is, says the Ran, because it's not like talis and tefillin, where you can't ask somebody else. The al biur chometz is to remind us that you can ask somebody else to do it for you. Let's say, for example, you're very busy, you're not well. So you can ask somebody else to check the house for you for chometz. So therefore, al biur chometz is on the mitzvah chometz. Levi is when you have to do it. Al is a mitzvah where the mitzvah, the main thing is that mitzvah is done. You don't have to do it yourself. That's what Shiur should, but that's not what we say. I don't know why right there it's different. I don't know. I just look at the Tosfos. It's the end of the fifth Tosfos that I did it. And let's just go to a bit more. Everybody agrees you have to make a bracha before. All the mitzvahs you have to make a bracha before you do them. Now I have to point out the next Gemara is brought down 5 or 6 times in Shas, the exact word for word. And every time I'm always puzzled because I don't understand what the Gemara is trying to teach you new about it. It comes up a number of times in Shas. If you do it now, then you can do it like if you do it very lot. This is the first time. How do you know the word over means before? Who told you the word over means before? Because he says you should make a bracha over last yoson. Who told you the word over means before? Says the Gemara, Omar Nachva Yitzchak, the Omar Kor Vayotz Achimot Derech Hakiko Vayavos Hakushi. They were going to tell David Melech that Avshalom was killed. So Achimot ran faster than the Kushi. So Vayavos Hakushi went in front of the Kushi. So it means it's before. He went in front of them. This is this week's parasha. That Yaakov went in front of his sons to bow down to Esav. So he went in front of them. So we see over last Yosef means in front. That Hashem came in front of them. So therefore we see by that Hashem comes in front by the Gula. So we see that the word lavoy means to go in front of something. So over last Yosef means that whenever you do a mitzvah, you have to do it before the mitzvah. So Beirav Omi, chutz v'dat tvila v'shofar. When it comes to tvila and shofar, you make the bracha after. Those are the only 2 exceptions. It says what? Bishlim tvila da katigava lechazi. We'll come to it in a minute in detail. Bishlim by tvila, you have to make the bracha afterwards because you can't make the bracha before. And the shofar my time. Why can't make a bracha before? Maybe you won't be able to blow. So you can't make a bracha before because maybe you will manage it. Maybe you won't be able to shecht. Maybe you won't be able to do bismillah. Maybe it won't work. So therefore, I can make a bracha before. The only one by tvila belvad. It's when when you finish tvila, and that's how we pass them. Now, of all the mitzvahs, there's only one mitzvah that you make the bracha after, and that is tvila. And the question is why? Why do you make a bracha after tvila? Why do you make a bracha after before you dry your hands? Okay, Rashi asks. They all ask the question. Everybody's got a big avichos. It's a lot of halachos. Rashi says, because Ezra made the takana that you're not allowed to say divrei Torah and divrei bracha when a person is got carry. It means once a person is tummy, he's not allowed to say brachas. So how can he make a bracha before tefillah? So he has to make a bracha after tefillah. Says Rashi, but the problem is, what about a different kind of tefillah? What about tefillah sheretz, the marshal? Says Rashi, once the massacre of tefillah carry, they always establish it like that. Says Tesa, I don't understand. We don't keep tefillas Ezra, right? We don't not back with them. It's back with them to say bracha tefillas Ezra. So therefore, the point is that how can Rashi say such a thing? And for Rashi, that the reason was because of Geirim. That Geir, how is he going to make a bracha of tefillah? He's a goy at the moment. It's only after the tefillah. And once they made that bracha for a Geir, they made the same thing for thing. Now, Maisa says to us that it comes out that by a niddah, the question is when should she make the bracha? So again, the man has a big avichos, and he says an interesting thing like this. He says, when the woman is dressed, we're scared that she won't go in the mikveh because she might get put off and it might be cold and she was thick. So you can't make the bracha then. Before she goes in, she can't make the bracha because she's not dressed. Once she goes in, so then she's toveled, so then you make the bracha after. That's what the Ran says, because they don't want to make it before. They can make the bracha after. Says the Ran, therefore, nevertheless, you should make a bracha also. She should tovel again. To be yotze the shittas Rishonim that you made to make the bracha before because it's only by Geir that said it. That's just a minhag by many. Tosfos goes through this whole cheshbon, and Tosfos actually asks your question, Shai, what about washing your hands? He says because we don't want to. Okay, we'll see. Tosfos talks about it. Again, it's going to think. The question now is only Do we go on? I'd like to do a bit more because I don't want to be every day. We said the Moshe Shabbos is a few minutes longer. Literally, it's easy to get more on the whole. You make B'dikas Chometz by a candlelight. We know Basically, we do a Gzeir Shava. Gzeir Shava is when you have two words which are similar, same word. In two different places, we learn from on to A. Here, it's Gzeir Shava to Gzeir Shava to Gzeir Shava to Gzeir Shava because we see the word mitzir is used in one place, and eventually we came to the concept that the way to do B'dikas Chometz is with the candle. How do we do it? And the more big psukim from each one. That's the word mitzir b'botich. So we see the word motzah, mitzir. And in that pasuk it says vayechapis, mitzir mechipus today. It says the word chipus there. V'chipus b'neus tichsib b'yisei yachapis Yerushalayim b'neus. I look through Yerushalayim with candles to see how they're behaving. V'neus b'nei tichsib nelekim nishmas odom. Chipus kol chad v'botzah. That Hashem uses a candle to check a person's mind and heart if he's serving him properly. We check the chometz by candlelight. It's not a proof. Rashi says, why is not a good proof? We just said Gzeir Shava. It says Rashi that's only a Gzeir Shava, a proper Gzeir Shava, if it's psukim from the Torah. Since some of these psukim are Nevi'im and Ksuvim, it's not considered a real Gzeir Shava. There's a machlokes Rishonim about this. The Kedem Kivega discusses it. But the Ma'aseh Rashi's shitta is you can't have a Gzeir Shava unless it's psukim from the Torah. So it's only a Zeichel Adom. The same Gzeir Shava we had before. Why do we have to have two psukim? If you think about it, once you've got the pasuk Chapis Yisraelim by neighbors with candles, why do we need another pasuk to a single candle? What's wrong with the plural candle? There, Akshvoch is discussing looking through the streets of Yerushalayim to see how Klal Yisrael is behaving. Now, we always daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he shouldn't look too carefully at our averos, right? So what's Chassidus say for writing that if a person has Shmira Sinaim, be careful where he looks, then Hashem has Shmira Sinaim. What does it mean Hashem has Shmira Sinaim? Hashem doesn't look at our averos, he guards where he looks. So to speak, he doesn't notice our averos. It's nice school. The Ma'aseh says like this, so we want Hashem not to look at our averos. So if we want Hashem not to look at our averos, so therefore what happens is we ask Hashem to look with a candle. A candle is not the best thing. A lamp, as we will see, the Havdalah candle, you can see much better. You see much more. So we daven to Hashem, we say to Hashem, look to Yerushalayim with a candlelight, which is only a very flimsy light. But when you want to look for chometz, you might have thought you should look for a better candle. That's how we bring another pasuk. Toshmane Hashem nishmas odom. That Hashem only uses one candle, not many candles to search. I just say there's one. Okay, we've got one very small point. They say the Shin Vilna Gaon. I couldn't find it inside, but it's definitely brought down in the Stipler Sefer his biography. The one in Rosh Kodesh. Not nice-ish. Lost the name for a second. He says like this: that this week's parsha, Mashal asks the kasha. Mashal on this page asks the kasha that why the Gemara wants to bring a raya that vayechapes vayimsol, that vayechapes and vayimsol the same pasuk we have both. And where's we'll go to Parshas Miketz. Now, if you look at this week's parsha, which is only told this, which comes earlier, it says that Lavan went into the house or into the tent of Rachel and Leah, and vayechapes rei motzah. He looked and he couldn't find. So if you're trying to find the word motzah mitzia and to find the word vayechapes, you've got a pasuk much earlier, and the Chazal should always bring an earlier pasuk on the late pasuk. Mashal asks the kasha. So Mashal answers that there, Lavan never actually found what he wanted. And by B'dikas Chometz, we hope, yes, to find what we wanted. So we look for a pasuk where he actually found what he wanted. That's what Mashal says, because there he found it, in Lavan he never found it. That's Mashal's answer. The same Shem the Vilna Gaon as follows. That when they were looking there for the Becher, Yosef was looking for the Becher. Who looked for it was Menashe. Menashe was sent afterward. Yosef sent him to look for the Becher. Did Menashe know where the Becher was? Yeah. Of course, he was the one who put it in the bag. So he wanted to teach us that even if you know where the chometz is, you're still doing B'dikas Chometz. You can have mitzvah. And the Stipler says, this is how he used to do it every year. He used to hide his own 10 pieces because he did not want it to get lost. He was nervous that his wife and children would forget. He would hide his own 10 pieces and go and look for it. Yes, but between the board that you see that you can look for something if you don't know where it is. We're up to Todu Abon on Zayin with base. It's a Shem 5 to 8 tomorrow. Have a very, very good vach. So good to the time. Okay.
I think
Sure.
he's more worried about his next like 10.
Good vach, everybody. Good to go and Sam, David, and Sully.
Right, we're attacking just for Tbilisi.
Oh, that's the discussion.
You're going to get a yes or a no. You're going to get no. There is the answer.
The Taser says, because of that Taser says, Mishnah point to Rashi, it says to him, Taser says, yes, that's what Taser says, you should make the bracha before the tefillah, not after the tefillah. Only by good. Tomorrow is talking about only by good. And therefore, that's why the women have a minig. The minig is to tefillah again. The minig is to tefillah. Yeah, that's right. Except for good. Except for good. Right.
It's amazing.